Throwaway because my husband lurks Reddit and I'm not stupid. Okay, I am, but not that stupid. Hi, I, 32F, am married to my husband, 34M, for 8 years, together for 12, and before anyone sharpens their pitchforks, yes, I cheated. No, it's not exactly how it sounds. And yes, I know how that sentence already sounds, so please calm down and let me explain before you decide I'm Satan in yoga pants. I'm posting here because my husband says he's processing and needs space, which is code for sleeping on the couch and staring at the ceiling like he just watched his childhood dog die. I feel bad. Kind of. Okay, I feel bad now, but that's not the point. The point is, I don't think I'm the villain everyone is going to make me out to be, and I need advice on how to get him to see that too. Some background. Our marriage has been fine, stable, predictable, beige. He's a good man, loyal, reliable, never forgets to pay bills, thinks a wild night is ordering Thai instead of pizza. We have 2 kids, a mortgage, matching coffee mugs that say his and hers, his idea, not mine, and a sex life that slowly turned into something you schedule like an oil change. I started noticing trouble about 2 years ago when I realized I was fantasizing more about not being home than about being with him. I told him I was just tired, or hormonal, or stressed from work. All lies, obviously, but polite ones. Here's where I might sound bitchy. I am. Deal with it. I did try. I suggested date nights. He suggested earlier bedtimes. I suggested therapy. He suggested less phone time. I suggested spicing things up. He laughed like I'd told a joke and said, "We're fine." That word, fine, became the first crack, because I wasn't fine. I was bored, lonely, and angry, that wanting more apparently made me high maintenance. I won't get into the cheating yet. That comes later. Relax. But I will say, the first sign something was really wrong was when lying became easier than telling the truth. I lied about where I was going. I lied about who I was texting. I lied about being happy. And the worst part? I was good at it. Too good. That's probably when this whole thing crossed a line, even before another man ever entered the picture. Anyway, that's the setup. The calm before everything exploded in ways I genuinely did not expect, including a Fitbit, a kid's science project, and a neighbor's Ring camera. Don't ask yet. So here's where the actual infidelity starts forming, even though I will absolutely insist, for now, that it wasn't cheating yet. Emotional overlap, gray area, semantic gymnastics. Pick your favorite excuse. About 1.5 years ago, I reconnected with someone from my past. Let's call him Evan, not his real name, obviously. We worked together briefly in my 20s before I got married, back when I still wore heels that hurt and thought sleeping till noon was a personality trait. He messaged me on LinkedIn of all places, which should have been my first red flag because who flirts on LinkedIn? Psychopaths and middle managers, that's who. He started harmless. Congrats on the promotion. You look happy in your profile pic. Lie. It was taken on picture day at work, and I had a migraine. We joked. We reminisced. I complained about work, then about life, then, inevitably, about my marriage, but always framed in a way that made me look patient and misunderstood instead of bored and resentful. I was very careful with my narrative. I wanted sympathy, not accountability. Meanwhile, at home, my husband was fine. Still fine. Oblivious fine. He didn't notice I was smiling at my phone more than at him. Didn't notice I started guarding it like it held nuclear codes. Didn't notice that I suddenly volunteered to run errands alone on Saturday mornings, wearing actual makeup like it was 2012. Here's one of the lies I told, and there were many. I told myself I deserved this attention. that it was harmless, that I wasn't doing anything, just talking, that if my husband had listened more, flirted more, wanted me more, I wouldn't be here. See how clean that sounds? I should teach a class. Unexpected event number 1. My husband actually did ask once. He said, "You've been distant. Are you okay?" And I looked him straight in the face and said, "You're imagining it. I'm just busy." Then I got annoyed at him for asking, because how dare he interrupt my double life with emotional awareness? Evan escalated things faster than I'll admit out loud. Compliments turned into confessions. Confessions turned into late-night texts. Late-night texts turned into voice notes. Voice notes turned into fantasies that I pretended were jokes. I told myself lines mattered, and then quietly stepped over them one by one. And before you ask, no, I wasn't planning on getting caught. I genuinely believed I was smarter than that I could manage it, that I could keep everyone happy. Spoiler, I could not. The real betrayal didn't start with sex. It started the night I chose to vent to Evan instead of talking to my husband, and then felt relief instead of guilt. That should have scared me. It didn't. It thrilled me. Okay, this is where things stop being abstract and start being real, which is also where my lying upgraded from casual to Olympic level. Unexpected event number 2, the meetup that wasn't supposed to happen. Evan and I had been talking for months without seeing each other. Different cities, different lives, plausible deniability intact. Then one Tuesday, he mentioned he'd be in town for a conference. I told him, "Oh wow, crazy coincidence," which is a lie because I'd known for weeks. I just hadn't decided yet whether I was going to be a good wife or an interesting person. Guess which one won? I told my husband I had a late work dinner, said it casually, didn't even flinch. I even complained about it in advance so it would sound annoying instead of suspicious. Pro tip, if you pre-hate something, people believe you. I wore a dress I hadn't worn in years, shaved everything. Told myself that didn't mean anything. We met at a hotel bar, public, safe, responsible. I ordered wine. Evan hugged me too long. I told myself that also didn't mean anything. We talked like no time had passed, like we were two people who hadn't been emotionally undressing each other for months. He told me I looked amazing. I told him he always knew what to say. That was lie number. Honestly, I lost count. Here's the unexpected part. I almost left. Genuinely. Halfway through the second drink, guilt hit me like nausea. I pictured my husband at home, probably feeding the kids, probably trusting me. I said, "This might be a bad idea." Evan said, "Then why are you here?" And instead of answering honestly, because I'm unhappy and too cowardly to blow up my life the right way, I said, "I don't know," which was technically true and therefore felt acceptable. We didn't have sex that night. I know. Shocking. Put a pin in that. What we did do was worse in a slower, more poisonous way. We kissed. We talked about what if. He told me he'd thought about me for years. I told him I felt invisible at home. He said, "You deserve more." I soaked that sentence up like it was oxygen, completely ignoring the fact that he was saying it while helping me betray someone who loved me. I went home late, later than I said I would. My husband was asleep. I watched him breathe for a full minute, like some kind of villain in a movie. Then I crawled into bed and cried silently, convincing myself tears meant I was still a good person. The next morning, unexpected event number 3. My husband kissed me goodbye and thanked me for working so hard for our family. I smiled and said, "Of course." That lie tasted different, heavier, and instead of stopping me, it weirdly pushed me forward, like I'd already crossed some invisible point of no return. So what was one more step? Here's where I need to be very clear about something before the comments explode. I still told myself I could stop. Anytime. Cold turkey. Like this was a hobby I'd simply grown bored of. That belief was ambitious. Unexpected event number 4. The second meeting wasn't planned at all. Which is a lie. It was loosely planned. Okay, fine. It was planned. But not with the intention of sleeping with him. That distinction mattered to me at the time. So let's respect the delusion. Evan texted that he had one more night in town. I told myself it would be rude not to say goodbye. Manners are important. I told my husband I was meeting a coworker for a quick drink. I even used a real coworker's name, which felt clever until later when it came back to haunt me in a truly humiliating way. This time there was no hotel bar. There was no second drink hesitation. There was a room key involved way earlier than it should have been. I remember thinking, wow, this escalated fast, like I was a bystander watching myself make bad decisions in real time. I won't get explicit, not because I'm classy, but because it doesn't matter. What matters is that the second I crossed that line, something in me flipped. The guilt didn't disappear, but it dulled, like background noise. I remember lying there afterward, staring at the ceiling and thinking, so this is it. I'm officially that person. Unexpected event number 5. My phone started blowing up, not from my husband, from my kids' school. A stomach bug outbreak. Early pickup tomorrow. I was half naked in a stranger's hotel room, texting, "Got it, thanks," to a school administrator, and the absurdity of that moment almost made me laugh. I went home late again. This time my husband was awake. He asked casually, "How was your night?" And I said, "Exhausting," which was true in the most unforgivable way possible. Here's the thing I don't see people talk about enough. After you cheat the first time, you don't immediately spiral. Life doesn't explode on contact. You wake up, make lunches, answer emails, act normal. And that normalcy messes with your head. It makes you think maybe it's survivable. Maybe you can compartmentalize forever. I became meaner after that. Short-tempered, defensive. I picked fights over nothing. Dishes, money, tone. Looking back, I think I needed my husband to be the bad guy so I could feel justified. He didn't cooperate. He just looked confused and hurt, which was wildly inconvenient for my internal narrative. And then, because apparently I hadn't learned a single lesson, I got sloppy. Unexpected event number 6. The Fitbit. Yes, that Fitbit. My husband is one of those people who tracks everything. Steps, sleep, heart rate, probably the emotional well-being of our houseplants. I, meanwhile, wear mine when I remember, which is to say sporadically, and usually only when I want credit for doing the bare minimum. This becomes relevant in a way that feels almost comically unfair. A few weeks after the hotel incident, I started meeting Evan again. Not often, not regularly. Just enough to convince myself it wasn't an affair, more like a side storyline. I told myself I was being careful. Different locations, short windows, no patterns. I was lying to myself, but with confidence. One afternoon, I met him during what I told my husband was a long lunch meeting. It was rushed, messy, emotionally charged, the kind of encounter that leaves you feeling both powerful and vaguely disgusted with yourself. I went back to work like nothing happened. That night, my husband was quiet, not angry quiet, thoughtful quiet. He asked me how my day was. I said, busy. Then he said something that made my stomach drop into my feet. "Hey," he said casually, "did you go for a run today?" I laughed. Too fast. God, no. When would I have time for that? He nodded slowly. Huh. Weird. Your Fitbit logged a spike. Heart rate went crazy for like 40 minutes around noon. I froze. Not visibly, I hope, but internally it was like every organ hit pause. I told myself to stay calm. I said, "Oh, that's probably wrong. Those things glitch all the time." I even rolled my eyes. Like technology, am I right? Here's the unexpected twist. He believed me. Or at least he acted like he did. He shrugged, said, "Yeah, probably." And that should have been my cue to stop everything immediately. But instead, I walked away thinking, wow, that was close. Not wow, I'm destroying my marriage. The real problem started after that. Once you almost get caught and survive it, your fear dulls. You get cocky. You start thinking maybe you're actually good at this. That's when I started making bigger mistakes. I reused lies. I forgot details. I said I was with coworkers who my husband later mentioned seeing on Instagram somewhere else. I snapped when he asked normal questions, which is always suspicious, but apparently I thought I was exempt from logic. Unexpected event number 7. Our kids' science project. A stupid poster board volcano. I borrowed my husband's laptop to print something, and while I was fumbling with the printer, a message popped up on his screen. Not from Evan, not from me, but from a fitness app syncing data. He didn't say anything in that moment, just watched the screen a little too long. Then he smiled at our kid and helped tape the volcano together like everything was normal. That's when I realized something important and somehow still ignored it. He wasn't clueless anymore. He was watching. I should have come clean here. This was the window, the last off-ramp before everything burned. Instead, I doubled down, because apparently self-preservation and self-sabotage share a brain cell. My husband didn't confront me right away. That was his first real mistake, giving me time. Time to rewrite history in my head, time to rehearse lies, time to convince myself that watching didn't mean knowing. I started acting extra normal, too nice, too attentive. I cooked dinners, initiated sex, asked about his day like I hadn't been emotionally outsourcing intimacy to someone else. Unexpected event number 8. I accused him of being distant. Yes, I know. One night, after the kids were asleep, I told him he seemed checked out, that maybe he wasn't present anymore, that I felt like I was carrying the emotional weight of the marriage. I said all of this with a straight face, which in hindsight is honestly impressive. He just stared at me for a long moment and said, "I'm just tired," which was either the truth or the politest lie I've ever been given. Behind the scenes, things with Evan were getting messier. He started pushing, asking what I wanted, asking if I'd leave, asking questions I didn't want to answer because answering them meant admitting this wasn't just escapism anymore. It was damage. I told him my marriage was complicated. I told him my husband didn't really see me. I told him I needed time, all half-truths arranged to make me sound trapped instead of deceptive. Unexpected event number 9. The Ring camera. We have one on our front door, installed after a package got stolen. I forgot about it completely, which is wild considering I walk past it every day. One afternoon, Evan dropped me off down the street, supposedly safe, but I forgot something in his car and jogged back laughing, hair a mess, touching his arm like an idiot. Guess what the camera caught? Not enough to be explicit, just enough to be intimate. Body language doesn't lie the way mouths do. My husband didn't mention it right away. Again. He waited. He watched. He compared timelines. He noticed how often my errands lined up with weird data spikes and unexplained gaps. He noticed how defensive I'd become, how my stories shifted slightly every time I told them. I, meanwhile, was getting reckless. I deleted messages but forgot about backups. I silenced notifications but left previews on. I told myself I was managing chaos when really I was feeding it. The confrontation didn't happen in a dramatic screaming match like you see in movies. No thrown phones, no accusations in the heat of the moment. It happened on a Tuesday. Quiet, calm. Tuesday nights are boring in our house. No activities, no takeout rituals, no excuses. Just leftovers and whatever show we're half watching while scrolling on our phones. That's why what happened next felt so unreal. Like betrayal shouldn't be allowed to surface on such an aggressively ordinary day. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He didn't even accuse me. He said very calmly, "Can you explain to me why your stories don't line up anymore?" That was it. That was the sentence. My stomach dropped so hard I swear I felt it in my knees. I laughed, because of course I did, and said, "What do you mean?" Even then, even there, I went straight to deflection. Muscle memory. He looked at me the way you look at someone when you already know the answer, and you're deciding whether you want to hear the lie anyway. Then he slid his phone across the table. Not aggressively, just placed it there. On the screen, timestamps, Fitbit data, a paused ring clip, not labeled, not annotated, just evidence, quietly existing. And here's the part I hate admitting the most. I didn't confess. Not then. I said, "You're being paranoid." I actually said those words. I told him technology glitches. I told him he was stressed. I told him he was connecting dots that weren't there. I even turned it around and asked why he was spying on me instead of trusting his wife. That's when his face changed. Not anger, not devastation. Something flatter, like a door closing softly. He said, "I wanted you to tell me the truth without me having to prove it." And instead of stopping, instead of grabbing that last lifeline, I doubled down. I cried. I gaslit. I swore on our kids. I said his lack of trust was hurting me. I performed guilt like it was a skill I'd been training for. Unexpected event number 10. He didn't argue. He just nodded, said, "Okay," picked up his phone, and went to sleep on the couch. That silence was worse than any screaming match. No accusations meant no resolution. No resolution meant I spent the entire night wide awake, replaying everything, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped the next morning, not in our house, but in the most humiliating place possible. If you ever want to feel spiritually naked, try being exposed in a place that smells like construction paper and stale coffee. The elementary school fundraiser was already a nightmare before my life imploded in public. Fold-out tables, silent auction baskets full of things nobody wants, parents pretending to care about themed gift cards. I was running on zero sleep, pure adrenaline, and the delusion that maybe my husband would just let it go. He showed up late, which should have told me everything. He didn't stand next to me, didn't touch me, didn't make small talk the way he always does. He just hovered near the back, watching, observing, like someone waiting for a confession they already knew was coming. Unexpected event number 11. Evan. I didn't know he had kids. I swear I didn't. Or maybe he told me once and I didn't listen because I'm selfish like that. Either way, there he was, standing at the snack table, holding a juice box and talking to a woman I assumed was his wife. The moment our eyes met, my soul left my body. We both froze, not in a romantic way, in a "oh shit, this is very bad" way. I looked away immediately, pretending to fuss with raffle tickets, praying he'd do the same. He didn't. He waved, not subtle, not a nod, a full, friendly wave, the kind you give when you think someone won't freak out about seeing you. My husband followed my line of sight. I felt it before I saw it, that shift in the air when realization hits. He looked at Evan, then at me, then back at Evan, then back at me. And something in his face finally broke. He walked over, calm, polite, introduced himself. Hi, I'm her husband. I wanted the floor to open up and eat me. Evan panicked. You could see it. He stumbled through his name, said something about knowing me from work. Lie. Bad lie. The kind that collapses under eye contact. My husband nodded slowly and asked, "Oh yeah? What department?" Silence. Evan glanced at me. I stared at the table like raffle tickets were about to explain quantum physics. That was it. That was the moment the story fell apart. No data charts, no ring footage, no tech glitches. Just two men standing in a school gym, one realizing the other had been inside his marriage. My husband didn't yell, didn't swing, didn't even insult him. He said, "We'll talk later," to me. Not Evan. Me. Then he walked out. I stayed. Because of course I did. Because leaving would have been an admission. Because I'm a coward, and I still thought maybe I could salvage control if I stayed put and smiled. Evan texted me 10 minutes later. I didn't know he'd be here. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. I went home alone. The house felt wrong when I walked in. Too quiet. Like it knew something I didn't want to say out loud yet. My husband was sitting at the kitchen table. No phone, no TV. Just a glass of water and that same flat expression. The one that scared me more than anger ever could. He didn't ask how the fundraiser went. He didn't ask about Evan. He just said, "Sit down." So I did. This is the moment where, in a better version of me, I tell the truth immediately. Full confession, tears, accountability, growth arc. Unfortunately, this is still me. He said, "How long?" I said, "What?" He said, "Don't." So I said, "A few months." Lie. He nodded slowly. "Did you sleep with him?" I hesitated, just long enough to make the answer obvious, and then said, "No." Bigger lie. He closed his eyes, took a breath, and then he did something I genuinely did not expect. He pulled out a notebook, not his phone, a notebook with handwritten dates, times, notes. He'd been keeping track, quietly, methodically, like someone preparing for court, not a fight. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't interrupt. He just asked questions and let the silence do the work when my answers didn't make sense. Every inconsistency landed heavier than if he'd yelled. Every pause made my lies feel smaller and uglier. Finally, he said, "I already know the truth. This is your chance to tell it in your own words." And I still tried to negotiate with reality. I admitted to one mistake, then a couple. Then it just happened once, each version crumbling faster than the last. At some point, I don't even remember exactly when, he stood up and said, very quietly, "Stop, you're making this worse." That's when I broke. Not dramatically, not all at once, just deflated. I told him everything, or most things. Okay, fine, enough things that the rest didn't matter. The hotel, the lies, the way I'd blamed him in my head, the way I'd enjoyed feeling wanted more than I'd cared about being honest. He didn't react the way I expected. No shouting, no threats, just a long, devastating silence. Then he said, "I don't know who you are right now." That sentence hurt more than anything else, because it was true. I didn't know who I was either, just that I'd become someone capable of sitting across from the person who trusted me most and lying to his face without shaking. He told me he needed time, space, that he couldn't even decide how angry he was yet, let alone what came next. He took a bag, left that night. I slept alone in our bed for the first time in years, surrounded by the life I detonated, finally understanding that no amount of clever excuses could undo what I'd done. I thought the hardest part would be him leaving. I was wrong. The hardest part was watching him continue existing afterward, like the world hadn't ended, even though his marriage had. The first few days, he didn't speak to me except about logistics, kids, schedules, who was picking up what. He stayed at his brother's place, which felt like an extra insult because his brother has always hated me in that polite, quiet way that now felt extremely justified. I texted him constantly. Apologies, explanations, long paragraphs about how I was confused and unhappy and didn't mean to hurt him. I even said the line everyone says, "This wasn't about you," which is technically true and emotionally useless. He didn't respond. Unexpected event number 12. He started losing weight. Not in a dramatic montage way, just subtle things. Pants looser, face sharper. He looked tired when he came to see the kids, like someone who hadn't slept because sleep meant thinking. He still showed up on time, still helped with homework, still kissed their foreheads. And every time I watched that, something twisted in my chest. Not enough to undo what I'd done, but enough to hurt. Here's the ugly part. A small, shameful piece of me expected him to rage, to beg, to demand answers, to make me feel wanted even in anger. Instead, he went quiet, calm, polite. That calm made it impossible to pretend this was mutual destruction. This was asymmetrical. I broke something. He was carrying it. When we finally talked, really talked, it wasn't about reconciliation. It was about understanding. He said things like, "I keep replaying every moment I trusted you. I don't know how to believe my own judgment anymore. I feel stupid for not seeing it sooner." That last one hurt the most, because he wasn't stupid. I'd worked very hard to make sure of that. He asked why, not angrily, genuinely. And I gave him a mix of truth and self-protection. I said I felt invisible. I said I was lonely. I said I didn't think he wanted me anymore. All of that was partially true. What I didn't say was that I liked being chosen without having to earn it, that I liked the fantasy of escape more than the reality of repair. At some point, he said, "I think I'm grieving someone who doesn't exist anymore." I wanted to argue, to say I was still me, that I was still here. But I knew what he meant. The version of me he'd built a life with, the one who didn't lie this easily, was gone. Acceptance doesn't arrive like a movie moment. There's no deep breath, no clarity, no swelling music. It shows up quietly, disguised as exhaustion. About 3 weeks after he left, my husband asked if we could talk somewhere neutral. Not the house, not his brother's place. We met at a diner halfway between, one of those sad, fluorescent-lit places where nothing important should happen, which I guess made it perfect. He looked different, not just thinner, older, like betrayal aged him faster than time ever could. He didn't sit across from me. He sat beside me. That should have felt hopeful. It didn't. He said he'd been cycling through emotions on a loop: shock, anger, grief, numbness, repeat. He said some mornings he woke up convinced it was all a misunderstanding, that he'd imagined everything. Other mornings he woke up furious, not just at me, but at himself for trusting so completely. Then he said something I wasn't prepared for. "I don't hate you." I almost cried from relief. Almost. "But I don't feel safe with you either." That landed harder than any insult could have, because he wasn't calling me evil. He was calling me unstable, unreliable, someone whose words no longer meant protection. He told me he'd been reading, a lot, about infidelity, trauma, trust. He said betrayal rewires the brain, that the person cheated on starts questioning reality itself. He said he'd realized something important in therapy. Yes, he went to therapy immediately, which somehow made me feel worse. I keep asking what you did wrong, he said. But the real question is whether I can live always wondering if you're telling the truth. I tried to defend myself. Habit. I said I was being honest now, that I'd cut off contact completely, that I'd do anything to fix this. He nodded kindly. I believe you're sorry, he said. I just don't know if sorry fixes broken instincts. That's when I knew. This wasn't about punishment, or leverage, or making me suffer. He was deciding what kind of life he could survive. He told me he wasn't ready to file for divorce, not yet, but he also wasn't coming home. He needed distance without finality, a separation with structure, rules, boundaries. And then came the unexpected part, the thing I absolutely did not see coming. He asked me what I wanted. No accusation, no bitterness, just a real question. I didn't have an answer. The separation rules were brutal in their simplicity. No dramatics, no ultimatums, just boundaries laid out like terms and conditions I definitely hadn't read before clicking, I agree, on this marriage. Rule 1, no contact with Evan. 0, not a closure text, not a goodbye, not checking his socials. My husband didn't threaten me here. He just said, if I ever find out you lied about that, I'm done. No anger, just certainty. That scared me more than yelling ever could. Rule 2, radical honesty. Not just about this, about everything. Where I was going, who I was with, what I was feeling. He said, if I have to play detective again, I'm out. Which was ironic, considering how good I'd made him at it. Rule 3 was the one that made my chest tighten. He said he didn't want reassurance. No begging, no emotional speeches, no convincing him I was changed. He wanted consistency over time, silence instead of performance, proof without pressure. In other words, I lost control. I wasn't allowed to manage his emotions anymore, couldn't spin the narrative, couldn't rush forgiveness, couldn't make myself the victim to soften the blow. I had to sit in the discomfort of what I'd done while he decided slowly whether I was worth the risk. And here's where I'll be honest, in the most unflattering way possible. I hated that. I wanted a checklist, a timeline, a guarantee. I wanted to know how long I had to behave before things went back to normal. But there was no normal waiting for me, just uncertainty and consequences. Unexpected event number 13. Evan tried to contact me. I didn't expect that. I thought he'd disappear quietly, like a shameful chapter you close and never reread. Instead, he emailed me from a different account. Long message, emotional. Said he missed me. Said he didn't know I'd choose my marriage like this. As if I hadn't chosen it when I said my vows. But sure, for a split second, just one, I felt that old pull, that validation, that familiar escape hatch. Then I pictured my husband at that diner, the way he said he didn't feel safe with me. And for the first time, choosing not to lie wasn't about saving my marriage. It was about not hating myself more than I already did. I didn't respond. I blocked him. I told my husband immediately. He didn't thank me. He didn't hug me. He just nodded and said, okay. And somehow, that was worse. I told myself the kids were fine. That was the lie I clung to hardest, because it let me keep functioning. At first, nothing seemed different. Same routines, same backpacks by the door, same arguments over bedtime. I convinced myself they were too young to notice that their father didn't live in the house anymore, that Dad staying somewhere else for a bit was a perfectly acceptable explanation. Kids are terrifyingly perceptive. They don't need details. They feel absences. My oldest started asking questions that weren't really questions. Why doesn't Dad read us stories anymore? Did I do something wrong? Are you mad at Daddy? Every one of those felt like a quiet accusation. even though they weren't meant that way. I answered carefully, too carefully. I blamed work, stress, grown-up stuff. I made sure not to blame my husband, because even I knew that would be unforgivable. Unexpected event, number 14. My youngest stopped sleeping through the night. Just started waking up crying. No explanation, no bad dreams they could name, just tears and clinging and asking for Daddy. I held them in the dark, feeling like a fraud, wondering how many invisible fractures I'd created that I'd never be able to see, let alone fix. My husband noticed too. Of course he did. He always notices things I don't. He told me, not accusingly, just honestly, that seeing the kids struggle was what finally pushed him out of pure anger and into something quieter, something heavier. He said, "I can be mad at you forever, but I have to decide what kind of father I'm going to be now." That sentence made it painfully clear. This was no longer about whether he loved me. It was about whether staying married to me made his life and their lives better or worse. I started therapy, not because I wanted to be saved, but because I had run out of places to hide. My therapist didn't let me soften my story. Every time I framed myself as misunderstood, she asked, "But what did you choose?" Every time I blamed loneliness, she asked, "Why didn't you leave instead?" There was no answer that made me look good. The more honest I became, the less control I had, and the more real everything felt. I stopped trying to win him back. I focused on not lying, not just to him, but to myself. That was harder than it sounds. And then, just when I'd accepted that my marriage might already be over and this was all just damage control, my husband asked to come over for dinner. I cooked his favorite meal like muscle memory kicked in before my brain could stop it. Same recipe, same plates. I even used the stupid matching mugs without thinking. When he walked in, he paused for half a second, like the house was a photograph from another life. We didn't hug, we didn't kiss, we didn't even comment on how weird it felt. We ate quietly, talked about the kids, school schedules, normal things. The kind of conversation you have when you're both pretending this isn't one of the most important nights of your lives. After dinner, he finally said why he was there. He told me he'd reached a decision, not a permanent one, not a fairy tale one, just a direction. He said he wasn't ready to divorce me. That was the moment I felt hope, real, dangerous hope, and I hated myself for how fast it came rushing back. But then he added, "That doesn't mean I'm ready to be your husband again either." He explained it slowly, carefully, like he was handling something fragile. He said trust wasn't a switch you flipped back on, that love didn't automatically mean safety, that forgiveness, if it came at all, would come long after the damage stopped echoing. He said he was willing to try, not to save the marriage, but to see if something new could grow where the old version died. Therapy together, separate bedrooms for now, no pretending everything was fine for the kids. Honesty, even when it made things awkward or ugly. Then he said the sentence that finally broke me, not because it was cruel, but because it was devastatingly fair. "I'm choosing to see who you are now, not who you used to be or who you promised to become. No guarantees, no timelines, no emotional safety net, just reality." I nodded. I agreed to everything, not because I thought it would fix things, but because for the first time, I understood that I didn't deserve certainty. I deserved the work, or the loss. That night, after he left, I sat alone at the kitchen table for a long time. I realized something uncomfortable. Even if we survived this, even if he stayed, even if we rebuilt, I would never again get to be innocent in his story. And that was the price. This is the part everyone always wants, the moral, the lesson, the neat bow. I don't really get one of those. What I get instead is perspective I didn't earn gently. My husband and I are here, still married on paper, still separated in practice. Some days feel hopeful. Some days feel like we're just very polite strangers who share children and a past. He still doesn't wear his ring. I still notice every time. But this isn't actually my ending. It's his. Because when I asked him, carefully, quietly, what he learned from all of this, he didn't talk about betrayal first. He talked about himself. He said he learned that trust isn't just believing someone won't hurt you. It's believing you'll survive if they do. He said he learned that ignoring small discomforts to keep the peace only delays bigger explosions. That being the stable one doesn't mean being the silent one. And that love without boundaries isn't noble. It's dangerous. He told me that if he could talk to anyone standing where he once stood, he'd say this: pay attention when something feels off, even if you can't prove it yet. You're not crazy for noticing patterns. And if someone shows you they're capable of lying to protect themselves, believe them the first time. Not because they're evil, but because it tells you who they are under pressure. He didn't say that with bitterness. He said it like someone who'd finally stopped blaming himself. As for me, here's the truth I wish I'd understood before I chose deception over courage. Cheating didn't happen because I was unhappy. It happened because I was afraid to leave and too selfish to stay honestly. I wanted change without consequences, intimacy without accountability, desire without disruption. And lying. Lying didn't protect anyone. It just delayed the damage until it hit harder and wider. My husband, my kids, myself. I don't know how this ends yet. Maybe we rebuild something new. Maybe we don't. What I do know is this. I don't get to control the narrative anymore. I don't get to be the misunderstood heroine of my own story. I get to be the woman who broke something precious and now has to live well enough that the people she hurt can decide whether she's safe again. If you're reading this and you're where I was, lonely, bored, resentful, telling yourself, it's not that bad yet. Here's my advice, even if you hate me for it. Leave, or tell the truth. But don't lie and call it survival, because eventually, someone you love will look at you and realize they don't recognize you anymore. And that loss, that one doesn't fade quietly.